No number in the Bible has terrified the world like 666. For centuries, it has appeared in whispered prophecies, dark paintings, horror films, conspiracy theories, and sermons about the end of the world. To many, it is the number of the devil. To others, it is the mark of the Antichrist. And to some, it is a secret code waiting to be cracked. But what if the real mystery of 666 is deeper than fear? What if this number does not only point to a monster in the future, but reveals something terrifying about humanity itself? Hidden inside the book of Revelation is a warning about power, worship, deception, and the human heart. A warning written to believers who lived under the shadow of empire. A warning that may have spoken to ancient Rome, but still echoes through the modern world. To understand 666, we must enter the strange and symbolic world of Revelation, where beasts rise from the sea, empires wear masks, and numbers speak louder than names. The story of 666 begins not in a haunted place, but on a lonely island. According to Christian tradition, John was on Patmos, a small, rocky island in the Aegean Sea. Around him was water, wind, silence, and the heavy shadow of the Roman Empire. Far away, cities burned with power and wealth. Temples rose. Statues of emperors stood like gods. Armies marched beneath banners of conquest. And small Christian communities tried to remain faithful in a world that often demanded their silence. Then came the vision. The book of Revelation does not speak like an ordinary history book. It speaks in symbols, images, numbers, angels, trumpets, beasts, thrones, seals, fire, stars, and songs. It is not meant to be read like a newspaper report. It is more like a spiritual unveiling, pulling back the curtain of history to show the unseen battle beneath it. And in Revelation chapter 13, one of the most disturbing images appears. John sees a beast rising from the sea. In the biblical imagination, the sea often represents chaos, danger, and forces beyond human control. So, when a beast comes out of the sea, the image is not random. It is a picture of terrifying power emerging from chaos, a power that dominates nations, receives worship, and speaks arrogantly against God. Then another beast appears, this time from the earth. This second beast does not merely rule by force. It deceives, it persuades, it directs people to worship the first beast. It gives the system a religious voice, a spiritual mask, a sense of legitimacy. Then comes the mark. Revelation describes people receiving a mark on the right hand or on the forehead, and without it, they cannot buy or sell. This image has haunted generations. But before we rush into fear, we must notice the deeper symbolism. The forehead suggests thought, belief, loyalty. The hand suggests action, work, obedience. In other words, Revelation is not only talking about the surface of the body, it is asking a much deeper question. Who owns the mind? And who directs the life? Then John gives the clue. He says this calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, because it is the number of a man, and that number is 666. That phrase matters. The number of a man. It tells us that 666 is not just a magical symbol floating in darkness. It is connected to human power, human pride, human rebellion, and perhaps even a real human name. The first readers of Revelation may have heard something in that number that we have forgotten. To them, 666 may not have sounded like random terror. It may have sounded like a coded accusation. But Revelation is careful. It does not begin by naming the beast. It begins by showing what the beast does. The beast demands worship. The beast imitates divine authority. The beast pressures the world to conform. The beast turns survival itself into a test of loyalty. And that is why 666 is so powerful. It is not frightening merely because it is mysterious. It is frightening because it stands at the crossroads of worship and power, faith and fear, conscience and survival. Yet even here, we must remember something crucial. Revelation is not centered on the beast, it is centered on Christ. The monster may roar, the empire may threaten, the number may terrify, but the final word of the book does not belong to the beast, it belongs to the Lamb. Still, Before we can understand the Lamb's victory, we must ask the dangerous question Revelation places before us. If 666 is the number of a man, then who was that man? And perhaps the first clue is not hidden in the distant future, but buried in the brutal world of the first Christians. To understand why 666 mattered, we have to leave behind the modern world of horror movies and conspiracy theories, and step into the world of the first Christians. Their world was not ruled by screens, elections, or global media. It was ruled by Rome. Rome was more than a city. It was an empire of roads, armies, coins, temples, governors, taxes, and public rituals. Its power stretched across the Mediterranean like a giant shadow. To many people, Rome looked eternal. Its soldiers brought order, its laws shaped society, its wealth filled the cities. Its emperors appeared on coins, statues, inscriptions, and public monuments. But for the early Christians, there was a dangerous tension beneath that order. They were not simply living under a government. They were living under a system that often mixed politics with worship. In some places, loyalty to Rome could be expressed through rituals honoring the emperor. The empire did not always ask people merely to obey its laws. Sometimes it asked them to bow. And for Christians, that created a crisis. They could respect authority, they could live peacefully, they could pay taxes, but they could not give worship to Caesar, because worship belonged to God alone. Their confession was simple, but dangerous. Jesus is Lord. In a world where Caesar also claimed ultimate loyalty, those three words could sound like rebellion. This is the world behind Revelation. The beast is not just a nightmare creature. It is the image of power, when power becomes sacred to itself. It is the empire, when the empire demands the soul. It is political authority when it dresses itself in divine language and asks human beings to surrender their conscience. This is why many scholars have looked at 666 and seen a possible historical clue: Nero Caesar. Nero was one of Rome's most infamous emperors. In Christian memory, he became associated with cruelty, persecution, and the suffering of believers. After the Great Fire of Rome, Christians were blamed, and the name of Nero became connected with terror and injustice. Whether every later story about him is historically simple or not, his image became a symbol of imperial violence. And here the mystery deepens. In the ancient world, letters could also function as numbers. A name could be calculated by adding the numerical values of its letters. This method is often called gematria. To modern ears, that may sound strange, but in the ancient world it was a known way of encoding meaning. When the name Nero Caesar is rendered in a Hebrew form, many interpreters have argued that its numerical value can equal 666. This does not prove every detail beyond all debate, but it gives us a powerful possibility. Revelation may have used 666 as a coded way to point toward a ruler whose memory embodied the beast-like violence of empire. There is even an ancient manuscript variation where the number appears as 616 instead of 666. That may sound confusing, but it actually strengthens the historical possibility for some scholars, because a slightly different spelling of Nero's name can produce a different number. So perhaps the earliest readers were not meant to stare blankly at the number. Perhaps they were meant to understand. Perhaps 666 was not only a puzzle, it was a whisper of resistance, a way of saying, we know what this power is. We know what it demands. We know what it does to the faithful. We know that behind the marble, the gold, the speeches, and the statues, there is a beast. But the deeper meaning does not end with Nero. If 666 only meant one dead emperor, the number would belong only to the past. But Revelation speaks with symbols, because symbols can outlive the moment that gave birth to them. Nero may be one face of the beast, but he is not the only face. Rome may be one empire, but it is not the only empire. Every age has powers that want more than obedience. They want devotion. Every age has systems that promise peace while quietly demanding compromise. Every age has voices that tell human beings, bow, and you will be safe. That is why 666 still speaks. It points backward to a real world of pressure, persecution, and imperial worship. but it also points outward, to every form of power that tries to take the place of God. And yet one question remains. If Revelation wanted to expose Nero, Rome, and the beastly nature of empire, why use this number in particular? Why 6? Why 6 repeated 3 times? The answer takes us even deeper, beyond history, into the symbolic language of the Bible itself. If 666 points us toward Nero, Rome, and the brutal world of the first Christians, that is already powerful. But Revelation is not satisfied with only giving us a historical clue. It wants to reveal something deeper about the human condition. The number itself matters. In the Bible, numbers often carry symbolic weight. They do not always work like secret codes, but they often help shape meaning. And few numbers are more important than 7. 7 often suggests completion, fullness, and divine order. The creation story moves toward the 7th day, the day of rest and completion. Revelation itself is filled with 7s. 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls, 7 spirits before the throne. The number 7 becomes a rhythm of fullness, a sign that God's purposes are complete. But 6 is different. 6 comes close to 7, but never reaches it. It stands just short of completion. It is near fullness, but not fullness. It can suggest human strength, human achievement, human glory, and human limitation, all at once. Humanity was created with dignity, intelligence, creativity, and responsibility. But humanity is not God, and that is where the danger begins. The problem is not that human beings are weak. The problem is that human beings often refuse to admit they are not divine. We build cities, empires, economies, armies, technologies, and systems. We create beauty. We discover knowledge. We organize the world. These things can be good, but when human power forgets God, it begins to worship itself. Then, 6 becomes more than incompletion. It becomes rebellion. And when 6 is repeated 3 times, 666, the symbol becomes heavy. It is like incompletion pretending to be perfection. It is humanity magnified, humanity enthroned, humanity crowned, but still empty at the center. It is man trying to become God without God. This is why 666 is so haunting. It is not merely the number of evil as something outside us. It is the number of human pride when it becomes sacred to itself. It is the number of power that wants worship. It is the number of a world that builds a throne and then forgets who truly belongs on it. This also helps explain why Revelation presents a kind of dark imitation of divine reality. There is the dragon. There is the beast from the sea. There is the beast from the earth. Some interpreters have seen in this a false trinity, a counterfeit reflection of God's truth. Evil does not only oppose what is holy, it imitates it. It creates false worship, false signs, false salvation, false peace. That is one of Revelation's most disturbing insights. The beast does not always look like chaos. Sometimes it looks like order. It does not always arrive screaming in darkness. Sometimes it arrives dressed in success, security, beauty, and public approval. It does not always ask people to hate God openly. Sometimes it simply asks them to love something else more. This is where the meaning of 666 becomes personal. It is easy to ask, who is the beast? It is harder to ask, what have I allowed to become ultimate in my life? It is easy to search history for a villain. It is harder to search the heart for an idol. Revelation is not trying to make believers obsessed with fear. It is trying to give them wisdom. It says, let the one who has understanding calculate the number. Wisdom means seeing beneath appearances. Wisdom means recognizing when power has become worship, when comfort has become compromise, when survival has become surrender. 666, then, is not only a riddle, it is a mirror. It shows us what happens when human ambition rises from the sea of chaos and claims the throne of God. It shows us the tragic almostness of a world without grace, almost complete, almost glorious, almost divine, but always missing the one thing that makes creation whole. The beast is terrifying not only because it rises from the sea, it is terrifying because it knows how to rise inside human ambition. And this is why 666 still matters today. Because the beast does not always appear as a monster. Sometimes it appears as success, security, pleasure, power, and a quiet invitation to bow. This is where 666 moves from ancient parchment into the modern heart. Many people have tried to attach 666 to whatever frightens their generation. One age fears a ruler. Another fears a machine. Another fears a new technology, a new currency, a new political movement, a new system of control. Every generation looks at Revelation and asks, is this it? Is this the mark? Is this the beast? But if we rush too quickly to identify the beast outside ourselves, we may miss the deeper warning inside the text. Revelation is not inviting us into panic. It is inviting us into discernment. The mark on the forehead and the hand is powerful because it touches two central parts of human life: what we believe and what we do. The forehead suggests thought, loyalty, worldview, the hidden place where we decide what is true. The hand suggests action, labor, obedience, the visible life shaped by those decisions. So the question is not only, what mark might appear in the future? The deeper question is, what already marks the human soul? What shapes our thoughts? What directs our actions? What tells us who we are, what we are worth, and what we must become to be accepted? In the ancient world, Christians faced the pressure of empire. In the modern world, pressure often wears different clothing. It may look like success, it may look like money, it may look like status, influence, comfort, pleasure, fear of being rejected, or the endless hunger to be seen. We may not stand before a statue of Caesar, but we still live among altars. There are altars of wealth, where human value is measured by what a person owns. There are altars of fame, where the soul is trained to perform for attention. There are altars of power, where conscience is sacrificed for control. There are altars of comfort, where truth is avoided because it costs too much. And there is the altar of the self, perhaps the most seductive altar of all, where the human ego quietly becomes a little god. This does not mean everything modern is evil. Technology is not automatically the beast. Money is not automatically the beast. Politics, business, media, and culture are not automatically the beast. The danger begins when any created thing demands the kind of trust, obedience, and devotion that belong only to God. That is the spirit of 666. It is not merely a number to fear. It is a pattern to recognize. It appears whenever a system says, bow, and you will be safe. It appears whenever a voice says, trade your conscience, and you will belong. It appears whenever the world offers comfort at the price of truth. And this is why Revelation still speaks with such force. It asks the modern person a question that cannot be escaped. When the crowd bows, will you bow with them? When success requires silence, will you stay silent? When truth becomes costly, will you still love it? When the world tells you that your worth depends on image, wealth, pleasure, or power, will you remember that your life belongs to God? The first Christians heard Revelation as a call to endurance. Not hysteria, not obsession, endurance. They were being told that the empire was not ultimate, Caesar was not Lord, and the beast would not have the final word. That same message reaches us now. The world may still create beasts. Human beings may still build systems that promise salvation while quietly stealing the soul. But Revelation teaches us to see through the illusion. It teaches us that not every throne is holy, not every miracle is divine, not every promise of peace comes from God. And if 666 is a warning, then Revelation also gives us a question of hope. If the beast marks those who belong to power, what marks those who belong to God? That answer leads us to the true center of the book. Not the beast, not the number, not fear, but the Lamb. The greatest mistake we can make with 666 is to let the number become bigger than the message of Revelation itself. Yes, Revelation shows us beasts. It shows us deception, empire, false worship, suffering, judgment, and spiritual conflict. It gives us images so powerful that they have haunted the imagination of the world for nearly 2,000 years. But the center of Revelation is not the beast. The center is the Lamb. That is one of the great surprises of the book. When Revelation wants to show ultimate victory, it does not first show a warrior covered in earthly power. It shows a lamb who was slain. In the logic of the world, a beast seems stronger than a lamb. A beast conquers by force. A beast terrifies. A beast demands obedience. A beast controls through fear. But in the logic of God, the Lamb conquers through sacrifice, truth, holiness, and love. This is the great reversal. The beast marks people by control. God marks his people by belonging. The beast asks for worship because it is empty and must be fed by human devotion. The Lamb receives worship because he is worthy. The beast promises survival at the cost of the soul. The Lamb offers life, even through suffering, because his victory is deeper than death. That is why Revelation was never meant to make believers live in panic. It was written to help them see clearly. It was written for people under pressure, people tempted to compromise, people surrounded by a world that looked unbeatable. It told them that Rome was not eternal, Caesar was not Lord. The beast could rage, but it could not reign forever. And this is where the meaning of 666 becomes complete. If 666 is the number of man without God, then the answer is not fear. The answer is worship restored. The answer is the heart returning to the true throne. The answer is not simply identifying evil out there, but refusing to let evil rule in here, in the mind, in the hands, in the choices, in the hidden loyalties of the soul. Revelation does not end with the beast standing victorious. It ends with Babylon falling. It ends with false power exposed. It ends with tears being wiped away. It ends with the holy city, the new creation, and the voice of God dwelling with his people. So, the final question is not only, who is the beast? The final question is, who owns my worship? What do I fear most? What do I trust most? What do I obey when pressure comes? What am I willing to trade my conscience for? What sits on the throne of my heart? The mystery of 666 is not solved only by calculating a name. It is understood when we see what every empire, every idol, and every human heart is tempted to become without God. The beast may mark the world with fear, but God marks his people with belonging. And in the end, 666 is not the final number. Fear is not the final word. The empire is not the final kingdom. The beast is not the final ruler. The final word belongs to God. And Revelation does not leave us staring at the beast. It lifts our eyes to the Lamb. What do you think 666 reveals most deeply? A future warning, a historical code, or a mirror of the human heart? Share your thoughts below.